All right, folks, so I wanted to record a video here to go over with you guys how to do your critique write-up for your photo assignments this semester. If you look at your assignments, specifically if you look at the instructions for the assignments, almost all of them, not all of them, but most all of them require you to critique the photos you took for the assignment. So I've got our Canvas course open here and I'm in module number 3. Specifically, I'm looking at photo exercise number 1 and the instructions for that assignment. And if you go about halfway down through the instructions, it indicates to you that after you've taken your 24 photos, you're going to be submitting 7 of those 24 photos to me. You're going to submit 4 of your best photos and 3 of your worst or bad photos. You know, photos that might be too dark or underexposed, too bright or overexposed or out of focus or blurry or any number of reasons they might be bad photos. In addition to submitting these photos, you're going to be doing a typed critique of the 3 bad photos you're submitting to me. The critique needs to include 2 things. It needs to state what's wrong with the photo, and then it also needs to include a brief statement that explains a solution to fix that problem if you were to take those photos again. To help you with this, if you look in the instructions, there's a link to an example critique that kind of shows you what format to do your critique in. So I've got here a demo photo log. So I took a bunch of photos and I created a photo log of those photos. We're going to use this photo log to help us with our critique. And then I have a demo photo critique here that I'm going to use to kind of demonstrate for you what your critique should look like and how to type it up. Now, to do this critique, of course, we need to actually take a look at our photos. So I'm going to go to my files. I've inserted into my camera my SD memory card so I can take a look at my pictures. And so as I open up the SD memory card, so again, in the previous video, I showed you guys how to insert the card into your camera. I'm going to look for the SD card in my files, and I'm going to open up the file folder labeled DCIM, and I'm going to open up the file folder for the model of camera I'm using. In this case, I'm using a D50. If you're using a D40, you'd open up the file that says D40. But if I open up the D50 file folder, I can see all these pictures that I've already taken. And so for this assignment, I'm going to review these photos, and I'm going to pick the 4 best photos, and I'm going to pick the 3 worst photos, and I'm going to do a critique on those photos. And I've reviewed these photos earlier, some good ones and there's some bad ones in here. But one of the photos I found was this photo here. I want to show you guys that photo. So this is a photo of just an oil lamp and some little knickknacks that are on a cabinet in my home. And this is a pretty good photo. If we look at it, we can see that the photo it's about the right exposure. It's not too bright, it's not too dark. We can see it's clearly focused. The depth of field is good, contrast is good. So this is an example of a good photo. So I might choose this photo as one of the photos I might submit as one of my good photos. But if I look at some of the other photos that we took of this same item, we can see that some of them didn't turn out so good. So again, this is that same grouping of knickknacks, but this photo is not so good. And so I might want to choose to use this photo as one of the photos I might submit a critique on. And we can see that this photo is photo number 49, DSC, again, which stands for digital still camera. So this is image 49. And so if I look, I can actually look in my photo log. And so let's go to my log at that photo. So let's look at photo number 49. If I pull up my log here, I can see that photo number 49. Again, that's that oil lamp and knickknacks on a shelf. And I can take a look at the focal length of the lens I used, so how zoomed in or zoomed out I was. I can look at the shutter speed I used, and I can look at the aperture setting I used. And then let's take again another look at that photo. Now, looking at this photo, what's wrong with it? That's one of the things we have to determine when we're doing our critique. And looking at this photo, I would say for sure the thing that I see that's most wrong with this photo is that it is way, way too bright. The term we'd use in photography is we would say that this is overexposed. And so if I'm typing up my critique, again, the first thing I have to do with my critique, and let's pull up our critique here. So this is photo number 49 that we're commenting on. And the first thing we need to do for photo number 49 is to state the problem. And the problem, which is basically just a description of what's wrong with the photo, is we would say that this photo is overexposed or too bright. All right, so that's the first thing. It's a very simple statement of what's wrong. What do we see that's wrong with the photo? In this case, the photo is overexposed or too bright. Well, that's the first part that I need to do for this photo in the critique. The second part is I need to come up with a solution to fix the problem. All right, so if I were to retake this photo, what could I have done differently so that the photo didn't turn out so bright? And one of the ways to figure that out would be to go back and take a look at my photo log to see what the settings on the camera were when I took this photo. So let's go back to our photo log. And again, we're looking at photo number 49. So for photo number 49, we can see that we used a shutter speed. So if we remember our columns, let's take a look at the top here so you can see. Remember that column there, the shutter speed and f-stop. So the first column after photo number. The focal length, 20 millimeters. Now, the focal length is not going to have any effect on how bright or dark is, so that's not really a solution. Changing the focal length is not really going to have an effect. But let's look at these two, aperture and shutter speed. The aperture or the f-stop number. First of all, I noticed that the f-stop number is really small, f3.8. Now, if you remember in the videos that you watched in our Canvas course on exposure control, whenever we have an f-stop that's a really small number, that actually means that the opening is quite large. And so a small number with f-stop means a really big opening, which means that we're letting in a lot of light as we have an aperture opening so large. Also, in terms of shutter speed, if we take a look at that, we can see that the number is quite small. And in terms of shutter speed, small shutter speed numbers mean that the shutters actually open a long time. So in actually both of these cases, shutter speed, because we're leaving the shutter open for so long, we're letting in a lot of light. And because our apertures open up really far, we're also letting in a lot of light. And so if we go back and look at the photo, again, photo number 49, we can see that the photo is way too bright. And it's too bright for really two reasons. One, we're leaving the shutter open for way too long. We're using too long of a shutter speed. And then the other thing we're doing is we have our aperture opening probably too wide open. So in terms of solutions, so if we go back to our critique, we actually have two different solutions. We could actually do both or one or the other. One solution might be to close down the aperture further, or use a larger f-stop number. Because remember, the f-stop number, as it increases, the size of the opening actually decreases. So by decreasing the size of the opening, we would actually be decreasing the amount of light. And so we wouldn't get as much light, and that would hopefully fix our overexposure problem. Of course, the other issue we could do is we could actually increase the shutter speed. So that would be another thing we could do. If we increase the shutter speed, then the shutter would open and close faster, which would let in less light, which again would fix our exposure problem. So in terms of photo number 49, we did a good job of identifying the problem, the fact that it was overexposed, and then we did a good job also of identifying a good solution, which would be to close down the aperture. Close down, I need to add aperture here, close down aperture further, or use a larger f-stop number. All right, so let's look at some other photos. Let's go back to our photos in our file here. So that, again, number 51, that was the one we were looking at before. That was, no, sorry, it's still loading 49 here. Okay, so there's 51. There's our good one, right? And then we looked at 49. That was a bad one because that was overexposed, and we addressed that one. Ooh, look at 47. This is of that same oil lamp, and this one's super, super dark. And so here the problem is that the photo is too dark, right? Or it's underexposed. So we might want to include this one in our critique. And so, yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to our critique. So again, this is photo number 47, right? It's of that same oil lamp, and knickknacks is super dark. You can probably hardly see it on your computer screen there, but let's include that one in our critique. So going back to our critique, this time, put a couple of returns in there. This time we're going to critique photo number 47. And again, like always, we need to first state the problem. And for this one, this photo is too dark, or we could say it's underexposed, right? It's too dark, can't see it really well. So again, like always, we have to state a solution. All right, so to figure out the solution, though, again, we should probably take a look at our photo log to see what settings we had when we took the photo. So I'm going to our photo log, and again, we're dealing with photo 47 this time. Let's look at photo 47. We use the same focal length as the other photo, but again, focal length has no effect on brightness or darkness. Notice this time we use a little bit faster shutter speed, shutter speed of 60 and the f-stop of f5. Now the aperture, it's not all the way open, but it's pretty far open. F5 is a fairly large opening, so the fact it's underexposed, we could open it a little bit farther, but that's probably not the issue as much as maybe the shutter speed. And so maybe to fix the exposure problem here is maybe we would want to leave the shutter open longer, or in other words, use a slower shutter speed to fix the problem. So if we go to our critique, our solution would be use a slower, oops, let's type this right correct though, use a slower shutter speed. For example, now the shutter speed we used, and it turned out too dark, was 60. So for example, shutter speed of, we could try 30 or even 15. Let's do a shutter speed. Let's say 30. 30 might probably do it. Shutter speed of 30. Or we could open up the aperture further to an f-stop of, remember we were at 5, so if we were to open up the aperture, then we'd want to go to a smaller number. Remember, smaller numbers mean larger openings, so we could use an aperture opening of maybe f3.4. And either one of those, in fact, maybe we might even try both. Considering how dark the photo was, we might actually try both. Using a slower shutter speed to increase light, or opening up the aperture farther to increase light. Those would probably fix our problem. So there, again, in terms of our critique, we've identified a problem photo. We've specifically stated what the problem was, and then we've identified a solution. So, but remember, for your critique, you have to do 3 photos, not just 2. So again, let's go back to our photos and take a look and see if we can find another photo that's pretty bad. Well, here we are. Here's another photo of the same subject, that oil lamp. Again, we'll wait for it to load here. So here's photo number 46, and that's a pretty rough photo. We could definitely try using that one in our critique. Or another one, also, here's number 43. 43 is a pretty rough photo too. This one looks like it's not really under or overexposed. It doesn't look too bright or too dark, but the major issue here just looks like this photo is really out of focus and blurry. And so that could be part of our critique. So again, we're looking at photo 43 here. So again, let's go back to our photo critique, and this time we're going to be critiquing photo 43. And then again, the problem is photo is, oops, spell it right here, is blurry and out of focus. So I think there's a pretty obvious solution to this issue, of course. The biggest thing would be to remember to focus the lens before taking the photograph, right? So that's not an issue of using a different shutter speed or using a different aperture. That's just forgetting to focus the lens before taking the photo. Again, remember, if you watch the videos in Canvas, whenever we take a photo, there's a 4-step process we go through to make sure we take good photos. And if you remember these 4 steps, most of your photos will turn out pretty good. To help you remember the 4 steps, there's an acronym we remember, an abbreviation, right? Remember the word FAST, which is F-A-S-T, and that's the steps we go through when we take a photo. F meaning focus and focal length. So whenever we take a photo, the first thing we need to do is actually focus the lens and select an appropriate focal length. This is especially important when worrying about depth of field. Then the next step is A. A stands for aperture. So we select the right aperture setting or f-stop setting for the photo we're going to take. Think about how wide open or closed down we want the aperture, depending on how bright or dark the environment is in which we're taking the photo. So if F is focus and A is aperture, then S probably would be shutter speed, right? We select a shutter speed appropriate for the situation. Remembering that if we're taking photos of subjects that are moving, like if we're taking pictures at our kids' soccer game and they're running down the field, we got to make sure that we use a fast shutter speed so that the image doesn't turn out blurry because of the movement of our subject. So shutter speed, or selecting the shutter speed, is S. And then T is that we do a test, which means that we use the camera's built-in light meter to determine whether or not our choices of aperture and shutter are appropriate for the situation, meaning that our photo is going to come out either properly exposed, or if it's not appropriate, then it could come out under or overexposed. So we need to do a test and then readjust. If the light meter tells us that we're not going to get enough light with the settings we've chosen, then we need to make an adjustment. So, all right, so this is your critique, right? Again, for the critique, it needs to be typed. You can type it in this case, I've done it as a Google document, but you could type it in a Word document if you wanted to, if you prefer using Microsoft Word. But again, I have to take a look at look at what the assignment instructions say. But for this particular assignment that we were kind of working on, we had to submit 3 bad photos, and we have to critique those 3 bad photos. And for each photo, I need to state the problem, again, what's wrong with the photo, and then I need to state a solution. So now that I have my critique done, I'm good to go ahead and submit this as part of the photo assignment. And again, you can submit this as an upload. If it's a Word document, then you would just upload the document. If it's a Google Doc, all you need to do would be then to copy the URL for the Google document up here, and then paste the URL in the text box. Or you can, of course, share the document. If you click share, then as the share box comes open, then you can type in the name of the people or the name of the person you want to share with. Specifically, it would be me as your instructor. So you'd want to make sure you type in my email address and click done, and it'll share a copy of that document with me. So anyway, that's how you do your critique. I hope this has been very helpful. If you have